in your own lives to any aspect of the film that started with 1839, looking at the first, I think they're called daguerreotypes,
Mm.
if I have the pronunciation correct, and then going to the antebellum period, the bellum period, the postbellum period, the Reconstruction period, into Harlem Renaissance, into the World Wars, into the post World War period, 50s and the 60s, into the modern era. I mean, it was a wide expanse there. It was a lot of stuff there, and before you respond, I think there are two trajectories that we should be aware of. The first trajectory with any art, any great art, is that there is the artist who creates art. So there's a relationship between the artist and the art. But then there's a relationship between the artist and the audience. The audience is the receiver.
Mhm.
And that relationship is relationship is tempered by the relationship of the receiver and their own environment, their own context. So there's this kind of very magical sweep of mysteries when we are looking at art. And so we perceive it in very different ways. The second trajectory is that when one is overtly political, the artist may have in mind the art piece as a, if you will, mystery. This thing I'm saying, it's a mystery, but they may be looking to right some sort of wrong in terms of the audience perception. And so we,
Mac, you muted yourself. You ended up on mute.
how did I do that? That was amazing. That's the third mystery. Anyway, there's a trajectory of the artist righting wrongs in terms of perception. So there's the bypass of the artwork, but the very real intention of looking at an audience and saying that there is a missing piece of the jigsaw here, and I want you to know, who these people are. And so it's an interesting thing to see what intention is. Having said all of that, looking at those two trajectories, I'm just curious because in the American Family album, if we were to construct an American Family album, the question is, what would it look like? And is it complete? The second thing I think about is who in your family keeps the family album. The third thing I think about is there are these moments that we see images, and the images are resonances of images in our own lives. When we look back at our lives, they're snapshots. And so, with that, I'd like to ask you, was there any moment that you thought was interesting for you? Just jump in.
I can jump in because I've actually even trying to even think of how to put any of this into words. I am the keeper of the photographs in my family and an amateur photographer. So the art of the photography really moved me, and the whole discussion of image of a people and their history and who they are, and seeing the history in their faces, in their bodies, in the art, to portray those things is very moving, very deep. And again, I'm just really struck by the whole position of image of a people, not having an image, or how important it is to preserve an image, far more than maybe for me in my history, which is known, and my race, that the whole connection to that. I have all these little papers of trying to capture all the photographers' names and their books and because I would like to really revisit it, but the whole image. Yeah.
Cool. That's great. Anyone else? Could have been one moment. I'm
I
going to
love
wait.
that the part with
Right.
the grandmother where she seemed to be a very quiet, more reserved person, but then you saw her throughout her life and she just emerged, still in a quiet way, but it was still like her demeanor and her elegance and her strength. It was all just, you know, the same all the way through, but you really got to know her over the years through those photographs. They really captured her.
Hmm.
I thought that was very striking.
That's great. I saw Cheryl put her hand up, and Cheryl is a person who I actually follow her family album on Facebook. One can say that social media is a tool and has the ability to project image as well. I certainly think of myself as using it in that way to give face to some things that perhaps weren't given face to prior, in terms of opinions, in terms of exposure. The same with the Wednesday night conversations we have. Cheryl is a person who has a history that goes back to the 1800s, and it is a photographic history, a wonderful history. And so she shares excerpts of that history on Facebook. And of course, everyone is, never, they can't wait until the next picture comes out. Yeah, talk to us, Cheryl.
Well, thank you so much. It's just been such a journey. I'm so excited to have as many photographs as I do have, and I've had more, and I've become the keeper of the family photographs, and it's just an interesting journey. One could tell stories. You could tell stories or pass down, family history, but with a photograph, it kind of brings it to life. And even the old photographs that I have of my family, my grandmother was born in Hackensack. Her mother was born in Hackensack. We have a long-standing history here, and she had a ton of photographs. And the interesting part I found lately is, although I looked at them at a young age, or in my teens and 20s and etc., when I look at them now they're telling me stories. Now I'm learning from these people who lived 100 years ago. And each time I look at the photograph, something else comes to light that I didn't know about that person before. So, and then I have a daughter who's 22. And without these photographs, how could I really illustrate the stories that I share with her? I want to also add that I was so excited about something someone said in the movie, in the film, and then I look up and it was my cousin, Lola Flash. She was in the film. She's a photographer out of New York, born in Montclair. And even working closer with her and following the attention she's gotten for her work, I think it's really just enriched my photography and the way that I've been able to tell stories and share it with others, because I feel like my family history, it's all of our family history. And if we just took the images that are just given to us, then we won't really know where people of color particularly existed, where they were 100 years ago. They were dressing nice and they were living nice existences in our community here in Bergen County, and not enough of it is talked about, I think.
Yes, I agree. And, I don't know, but I can't go into a home, regardless of who it is or what their ethnic group, and look at their family album and not be entranced in some way.
I love it.
Because it tells the story of the family.
Yes.
I'm wondering, for those of you who are watching, regardless of your background, what were you thinking as you saw particular images? Anyone?
Mac, Warwick here. It's funny, some cultures don't like people being photographed because it says the camera will take your spirit away.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at these photographs made me think that the way you can keep a spirit living forever is through a photograph, because these people just come to life. Yes. I mean, the joy, the pain, the poverty, the wealth, et cetera, and I enjoy history, reading history, but I also know that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And truly, looking at a bunch of history like this, you get a much better feeling for the experience of the African Americans in America as you would by reading any book. I think it's a great, great documentary, and I really enjoyed it, especially being a serious photographer myself.
That's great. That's great. Did anyone hearken back to experiences of their own, of their own life and family or background as you were, as you saw a particular image?
Yes, I would just like to say that I really enjoyed seeing this particular film, and
This is my mother. Hey, Ma, can you turn the video on?
the video.
Oh, okay, never mind. It's okay. There you go.
Yeah, okay. Yes, I really enjoyed it so much. I have a number of albums, and you know, every time I look in the albums, I see pictures of maybe like some of the nieces who were little children, and now they're parents, and it just, it's people really, the people who passed on, they've never really died when you go through those old pictures, because you can think about the times that you maybe, like, for example, on a personal note, when just before my husband and I journeyed to go to North Carolina to go to college, and we were married, and to go to seminary, a group of the church members came over to the house, and I have a picture of that with, you know, we were sitting on the couch, everybody, and it was just so nice. And so, you know, most of those people have passed on, but this was the presentation tonight was, you know, it emotionally, it really touched me very deeply to see how our people have gone through different phases since slavery. And also, I was very impressed with the Reconstruction period. That has always fascinated me when I see pictures and I hear stories about that, about the leadership of our race with our country. So I'm very appreciative of being invited to this. I just accidentally saw it. Well, I guess it wasn't an accident last night. And thank you so much for this presentation.
Yes, it was a
Wonderful.
wonderful, wonderful documentary. You know, one of the things that was in a very almost in the beginning of the film was they were talking about secrets, and that there were secrets in the picture. And sometimes you can watch an album, look at an album, and look at a picture, and what is recalled are the things that are not necessarily so obvious. Sometimes there are secrets that are carried, and the image gives us some inference of it depending upon our experience. You know, I guess the question is, you know, what secrets are in your pictures that others will see, you know, in time? That's one of the things that I think is really interesting to observe. But please, anyone else had any impressions?
Yeah, hi, I have something to say. Is Mahmoud. Now, I saw something different. I saw pain, I saw suffering, I saw how our brothers and sisters from the from African American community, you know, had to endure for many, many years. But also the pictures depicted how strong they were. They refused to give up, and they tried to overcome, you know, all the prejudices and the bad treatment. You know, it's on the one hand, it was inspiring to see that, but on the other hand, it was so hurting to see the suffering and the pain that they went through.
Yes, absolutely. You, oh, does someone else want to say something?
I have to
Hi,
stop,
Joe.
but there is like an echo, but go ahead. Oh, Dan, go ahead.
It's me. So when I noticed that Alma Bartels is on, her father is Alma is a budding photographer, I know, but her father is Till Bartels, who's a very famous European photographer. And one of the things I love about Till's photography is I remember when the Berlin Wall was coming down and seeing it from a German perspective, I couldn't help but wonder what society would be like today if African American photographers and journalists were part of the mainstream media from the 20s, 30s, 40s, how society could be different, could be better today.
I've thought about that too. Yes.
So,
That's a great point.
so Mac, this is Siobhan,
Yes.
and I'm not going to take my picture off, ironically, because I'm in my pajamas. So I want you to see this version of me. I
Are
love
there secrets? No, go ahead.
So I loved everything about the photography and the positive parts of it, but I too felt that one of the pieces that was missed was that initial photography sort of exploited the African American community, and they told a different story for them, and they loosely touched upon that. And clearly that's about race, but here I am. I wouldn't want you to see me, so I'm using a stock photo. And this is something that spoke to me as a female when we heard things about the beauty myth, and now with our teenagers, how with social media, as adults, we're mostly responsible and we tell good stories, but our kids are telling stories that they want to be that might not be. So the two things that really spoke to me were that, absent like a true commitment from the African American community, their stories were told in other ways by other photographers. And then two, the same thing is somewhat happening with our teenagers now, where they sort of tell an online digital story that can be worrisome because none of it's true as well. But I don't want to be Debbie Downer with that and say that, but I did think the photography, the overwhelming theme is it's powerful and it needs to be used responsibly. And those were my takeaways.
You said a lot there. The film actually used Birth of a Nation and did not, delve that deeply into the film. But from the very beginning, certainly, mainstream photography has been that which has been denigrating and demeaning to African Americans. And I think that Deborah Willis's aim was to present the African American as photographer, as image maker. And so they started with Leon, who was, a free man of color from Paris. Some speculate that he was born in New Orleans and sent to school in Paris, but he came back and he was the second person. The first person was in New York to to bring a technique which is considered the advent of modern technology. The camera obscura is a technique which had been, in use for hundreds of years. But this process of taking a copper with kind of this mellow alloy and then exposing it to light, and then having this copper plate, which serves as a template by which you can actually see images and also reproduce it for others, was the beginning of photography as we know it. And Leon, who was a colored, if you will, man, brought it to New Orleans as it started in Paris, this technique. And of course, even though since 1803, Paris was part of the Louisiana Purchase, it was a French colony. But it was taking hold of the image, and I think she really wanted to provide the trajectory of African Americans as taking hold of their image. With regard to what you said in the latter part of your statement, yeah, I think that for specifically in the last 4 years, the notion of truth in imagery has been one that has been at the fore of our understanding of who we are. That news is not just oral. news is also visual. And so to have the moniker of fake news is something of import. And so we grapple with, what is truth? What is the truth of the American Family album? What does it look like? I think the statement that Jan Phillips says is one I've often thought about, and I thought about it from the first time I looked at the film. If image makers of all ilk could have been in the mainstream, as it were, how would we understand ourselves differently as we look at the 20s and the 30s and the 40s and the 50s? And we certainly see now that there's still a battle of imagery. There's still a battle, even if you look at the streams of conversation in Facebook and or Instagram or whatever you use. One of the things you notice is that they're like two camps. There are multiple of camps of folks saying who we are, and you see it displayed in the visual imagery. It's really quite interesting. If we stop reading and just look at the imagery, it's very much one where the purveyor, where the person who instigates this imagery, has a say, and depending upon their audience, one might accept that this image is true. So yeah, I think that it's an interesting thing. As you were saying that, I was thinking about kind of this notion of the selfie. And this notion of the selfie is not a new notion, right? And so people I had a photographer on the Wednesday night conversation on Wednesday, and he was talking about how postcards in the 20s and the 30s were sent, and that was a way of communication. People would take pictures of themselves and their family, and they would send these postcards out to say who they were. Indeed, the people from the North, people of color from the North, would send down pictures to their kin in the South. And that was part of the instigation of folks wanting to come north, because they're saying, wow, this is certainly not a sharecropping life that you're living with this fine suit that you're wearing, and so the imagery was very important. And so this notion of image making and how we cull that is very much alive now. And I'm happy that I live in a time where we can begin to catch up as a mainstream in understanding like kind of the multiplicity of ethnicities and stories that we all have to tell. I see that my time's really growing short. Is there anything else someone wanted to add?
The only thing that keeps coming to mind for me is I keep thinking back that I think that there were far more photographs than in the African American community that families may have had. They just weren't able to pass them on. So often we're looking and saying, oh, they didn't take photographs. I don't know if it was just whether it was taken or not, as much as the preservation of those photos to be able to be handed down to the next generation.
The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein is a wonderful book to read. And it talks about housing patterns, and it was talking about grants that were given to builders in the post-World War II period. Grants that were given to builders of suburbs like the suburbs that we live in, that specifically said that you may not have African Americans as residents. This is a wonderful book, but it speaks to something more than just that. It speaks to stability. It speaks to the fact that many of the homes that that African Americans live in are the residences of a much shorter period than their white compatriots. And so it is possible to have a house that you lived in for 60 years and 70 years. It's possible to have a family home for 100 years. It's possible for the longitude of your family in America, if you've been here for 100 years, to have been lodged in only 2 residences, right? And with that stability comes like the legacy. Let's take pictures. Let's preserve it, right? How many times, if for the Africans and African Americans in the audience here, how many times have you asked about pictures and people say, "Yeah, I remember there were pictures, but they got lost. I don't know who has them. Oh, I remember Grandmary Mary had some, but I don't know what happened to them," because of the lack of stability, because of moving around, right? So everything has a has an effect on everything else that we look at, and I think that's important to say, because sometimes when we hear about a statistic of a group, we might think of it in an isolated way, but it's very much connected. So I think, Carol, that you are, I said Carolyn, didn't I? Because you know why, because of your relative, right? Cheryl, I think of stability as being a very, very big factor in terms of peoples themselves having, you know, the citadel of legacy, which would be the family albums in their homes. I know for me personally, I took a trip. I got on a plane and went to Chicago to interview my Aunt Idella, who is now passed away. And I videotaped her just to get her legacy. But I also recently found out that she had a ton of pictures. But those pictures are now. And I asked about 6 months ago, where are those pictures? And what did they say? Well, I don't know. I know they were somewhere. So this is a moment that we can really, as people, since we are so visually oriented, that we can be very affirmative in our record keeping. And I think that this documentary goes a long way for us to understand the history of it, but also to think of our own sense of legacy, our own sense of record keeping, our own sense of visual history. And also, as we move into a new era of presidency, I think it would be interesting for us to see the visuals. What does it say about the American Family album? As we see the administration going out, look at all that enveloped the president in terms of the projection of the family of the photo album, and then as we see the new president, what does it mean? And it may not mean anything, but it certainly might. I submit that it certainly does. A projection of who we are is as much a visual projection as it is a projection on paper. So I thank you, Roberta, for suggesting this film, because I think it was a really wonderful opportunity for us to see the story of a people, but also the story of ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mac. You always have such incredibly thoughtful, thoughtful conversation. I did repeat some of the Mac's Wednesday night Zooms. I repeated his link from earlier in the chat. Siobhan gave some information about the drive tomorrow at Ridgecrest from 9 to 12. The MLK service is Monday at 10 o'clock, 10 a.m. and that's the webinar link there. And then the Tuesday night Race Together. Does anybody from the MLK committee want to mention anything about the weekend events? Got it on. Okay. Okay.
I'll speak for a minute, Roberta.
Hey, Bunny.
Good evening, everyone. Roberta, we just want to say thank you for a wonderful event tonight. Thank you, Reverend Brandon. We're very excited. This was a great start to our second MLK weekend. We look forward to seeing everyone on Monday. I believe that we have a beautiful service plan, so I hope that you can join us. And as Siobhan mentioned, tomorrow morning they will be doing the food donation at Ridgecrest, which will be our community service project. So I just want to thank everybody for their support, and I think it's going to be a great weekend. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Bunny. Okay. Thanks again, Mac, for everything, and it's great to meet your mom tonight. She did well. Okay. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming. Just wonderful to see such a great turnout. And I'll be sending all of you a link for the next Real Voices. We're doing a film called A Small Act. And it's about a young Kenyan boy who was anonymously sponsored by a Holocaust survivor. And he wound up going to Harvard and working for the UN. It's just one of those incredibly inspiring films about like a tiny small thing you do can just cause a ripple effect and really, you know, just, I don't know, just really, just seeing if there's anything else there. You know, just believing in people and building on kindness. So I just hope we all stay in the high road. Looking forward to a good week, right? For me, 2021 begins on Wednesday. I moved it up a couple weeks. So thanks again, Mac. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, MLK Committee. And we will see you Monday at 10 a.m. Okay. Okay.
Take
Good
care.
night. Thank you.